Welcome back to Noir Alley. Today we're taking a jaunt across the pond for a mystery thriller set in England. It's Postmark for Danger, produced in 1955 by Insignia Films, a short-lived production company with less than 10 features to its credit. This was probably the most prestigious production, with a couple of up-and-coming actors, Robert Beatty and William Sylvester, cast opposite imported American ingenue Terry Moore. This kind of transatlantic commingling of financing and actors was common in the 1950s. Richard Conte, Gloria Graham, Dane Clark, Alexis Smith, and many other Hollywood stars made films in the UK for a variety of reasons. In some cases, American studios had money frozen in British banks after the war, and partnering with UK companies to produce low-budget features was one way they could recoup those funds. Sometimes actors did it for tax breaks, deferring their salaries into a shell company that would later distribute the money at a lower tax rate. Other times it was political, waiting out possible blacklisting at home because of their refusal to cooperate with the House Un-American Activities Committee. Whatever the reason, British producers benefited because having American stars in their pictures typically meant a guaranteed release in the United States. RKO distributed Postmark for Danger stateside in January of 1956, just months after Howard Hughes sold off his interest in the studio that he'd steadily mismanaged toward oblivion. I mention this because of the relationship Hughes had with Terry Moore. According to the actress, she and Hughes were married in 1949 aboard a ship in international waters, and they never divorced, despite both of them marrying other people. Hughes married Jean Peters in 1957, and Moore would marry 5 times, including tying the knot with Jean Peters' ex-husband, Stuart Kramer, in 1959. Moore alleged Hughes had the ship's log destroyed so there'd be no evidence of their wedding ceremony. But finally, in 1984, 8 years after Hughes's death, his estate settled with Moore for an undisclosed sum. She considered it sort of a posthumous alimony payment. That is a wilder plot than the one in today's movie. Originally titled Portrait of Allison, the story revolves around an artist played by Robert Beatty, getting pulled into a baffling mystery after his brother is killed in a car crash in Italy. The only clues are a postcard with a cryptic drawing and the aforementioned Portrait of Allison, which looms Laura-like over the whole abstruse affair. The original story is by Francis Durbridge, one of England's most popular and prolific mystery writers, although he's barely known in America. That's because most of Durbridge's stories were written for radio, television, and the stage, all trickier to export than a novel. Not that Durbridge didn't produce those as well. For the novels, 43 of them, he often used a co-writer to keep pace with public demand. Durbridge was definitely a brand in his day, hosting the television series Francis Durbridge Presents, very much like what transplanted Brit Alfred Hitchcock was doing on American TV at the same time. The co-screenwriter of Postmark for Danger, Ken Hughes, made his bones in the early 50s writing crime pictures, and he'd go on to direct a number of them later in the decade. Things like The Case of the Red Monkey, Wicked as They Come, and The Long Haul, starring, respectively, Richard Conte, Arlene Dahl, and Victor Mature, all imported from Hollywood. Hughes's co-writer on this one, Guy Green, who also directed the film, was adept at all aspects of movie making. He'd already won a Best Cinematography Oscar for his work on the 1946 David Lean classic, Great Expectations. Today's story borrows bits and pieces familiar from lots of other mystery movies. Let's see if it delivers enough to get your stamp of approval. Here is Postmark for Danger. Okay, it's not Laura, but it's trim and tidy in a particularly proper British fashion. It certainly was an easy paycheck for Terry Moore, who isn't on screen all that much and essentially plays herself. Moore was 26 when she made Postmark for Danger, but she was already a show business veteran, having made more than 24 features, including a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination for the 1952 drama Come Back, Little Sheba. For well over 7 decades, Terry Moore has maintained one of the most eclectic careers of any actor, swinging between top-flight productions like Elia Kazan's Man on a Tightrope and bottom scrapers like the 1985 sexploitation picture Hellhole. In 1953, she appeared on the cover of Life magazine, touted as Hollywood's sexiest tomboy. 31 years later, at 55, she posed for Playboy, billing herself as Terry Moore Hughes, an eye-opening way of celebrating her alimony settlement with the late mogul's estate. Now in her 90s, she's recently had featured roles in the shows True Detective and Ray Donovan. Josephine Griffin had a significantly shorter acting career. She is terrific in the role of the ill-fated Jill Stewart, giving the most natural and assured performance in the movie. After making her stage debut in 1951 opposite Peter Ustinov in The Moment of Truth, Griffin became an in-demand film actress, making 9 pictures in 3 years. But not long after wrapping this one, she retired from acting, marrying producer Patrick Filmer Sankey. He was related to the second Duke of Windsor or some such thing, which may explain why he'd keep a name like Filmer Sankey. After becoming a woman of privilege, Mrs. Josephine Filmer Sankey wrote a book about the legendary Bayeux Tapestry, a 230-foot-long textile scroll from the 11th century that depicts the history of England leading up to the Norman Conquest and the Battle of Hastings. See? It really does take all kinds. One actress writes a book about a legendary example of Romanesque art, the other poses for Playboy. You gotta love them both. Ken Hughes, the screenwriter of Postmark for Danger, had a prolific career as both a writer and director. It peaked with his dream project, 1970's Cromwell, starring Richard Harris and Alec Guinness. Despite the hoopla surrounding its production and release, the film bombed, which pretty much ended Hughes's career in England. He moved to Hollywood and finished out his career making stuff like Sextet with 84-year-old Mae West and the 1981 slasher film Night School, which, if nothing else, marked the movie debut of Rachel Ward. Director Guy Green also moved to America in the 60s, where he made films as different and distinctive as A Patch of Blue, The Magus, and his biggest hit, Jacqueline Suzanne's Once Is Not Enough. I'll wind up with a bit of trivia. The 2 male stars of today's film, Robert Beatty and William Sylvester, appeared together 12 years later in a film that garnered a bit more attention than Postmark for Danger. They played scientists sent to the moon to investigate the appearance of a strange monolith in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. We'll be back on U.S. soil next week for a picture I've been eager to show ever since I got this gig. It's one of the signature films by the director I consider the finest maker of noir, Robert Siodmak. Victor Mature and Richard Conte co-star in the 1948 crime drama Cry of the City. It's the most operatic semi-documentary you will ever see. If you can't make it, at least send a postcard. Until next week, see you in the shadows.
Next on TCM, Love in the Afternoon, then Love in the Afternoon, and later, A Fever in the Blood. Things are heating up on TCM tonight.